Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you're maybe wading through all the paperwork for home loan right now, you've probably wondered, who's actually keeping an eye on the people selling me this massive thing?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's exactly what we're tackling today. We got requests for a deep dive into how mortgage regulation actually works, the mandatory stuff. So our mission really is to map out those key steps, the disclosures lenders have to make. We're focusing on what they call MCD-regulated mortgages, basically most contracts signed on or after March 21st, 2016. Think of it as the borrower protection blueprint.
Absolutely. And to understand that blueprint, you really have to look at the main rule book, which is the MCOB, the Mortgage Conduct of Business Sourcebook.
MCOB, right?
Yeah, MCOB. It's kind of the FCA's, let's say, ethical and procedural Bible for anyone selling mortgages. It dictates exactly how they need to act, from the very first ad you might see right through to when you sign on the dotted line. And it lays out a really structured process. So what we'll do today is follow that process. We'll look at how they market mortgages, what they absolutely must tell you up front, those mandatory disclosures, and this is key, the difference between getting advice and just going execution only.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that. This whole regulatory journey, it sounds like it breaks down into distinct phases. You've got, let me see, 6 main stages. Starts with trying to get your attention, ends when the contract starts. So stage 1, financial promotions, the marketing bit. Then 2, initial disclosure, that first proper meeting. 3, giving advice and, importantly, responsible lending. 4, making the actual application. 5, getting the offer. And then 6, final disclosures right at the start of the contract. But I guess we should really focus on those first 3. That seems to be where most of the, the core protections kick in.
That's exactly right. And those rules around stage 1 financial promotions, they are incredibly strict. And for good reason. I mean, this is the firm's first attempt to invite you or maybe induce you into this huge financial commitment.
And there's a gatekeeper right there, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
A firm can't just put out an ad. They have to be, authorized by the SCA?
Either authorized themselves or the actual promotion content needs to be signed off, approved by an authorized firm that has the right, competence and expertise. So yeah, there's definitely an oversight layer before it even reaches the public.
Okay.
And the specific rules, they actually change depending on how they promote it, whether it's real time or non-real time.
Okay, let's start with non-real time. That's the stuff without dialogue, right? Like emails, texts, letters, ads online or in magazines.
Exactly. Anything non-interactive.
So because there's no back and forth, the rules must be super clear up front.
They have to be. The detail is quite specific. Every single non-real-time promotion needs the company's full name and address, or, at least a phone number if the address isn't obvious. And maybe most importantly, the ad can't hide or obscure important stuff. It has to be clear, legible, upfront. No funny business with the small print.
Right. And this is where that really crucial warning comes in, the one about losing your home.
Precisely. They must include that statement about the risk of repossession if you don't keep up the payments. It sounds obvious, maybe, but making it mandatory hammers home that the loan is secured against your property.
Makes sense.
And beyond the risk warning, the numbers themselves are tightly controlled too. They always have to show the annual percentage rate of charge, the APRC.
The APRC. Not just the headline interest rate, though.
No, definitely not. This is the figure that shows the total cost of borrowing over the whole loan term, including mandatory fees. It's meant to give you the true picture of the cost.
And what about that represented example thing? I always see that.
Yeah, that's another key rule. The example they use, the typical rate, the total cost shown in the ad, it has to be representative of what at least 51% of people who actually respond to that specific ad would genuinely be offered, or, maybe even a better rate than that.
So they can't just dangle some amazing rate that almost nobody qualifies for.
Exactly. That 51% rule is there to stop misleading advertising. It ensures the example is, actually representative of what most people can realistically expect.
That feels important for transparency.
It is, and firms have to be able to prove it. They're required to keep meticulous records of all these non-real-time promotions for at least a year after they last used them. It ensures accountability.
Okay, so that covers ads and emails. What about real-time promotions? Phone calls, face-to-face meetings?
Right, the interactive stuff. With real-time, the rules focus a bit more towards conduct and consent, especially around cold calling.
Cold calls.
Yeah.
Are they even allowed?
Generally, no. True cold calling is pretty much banned. They can only make unsolicited calls if you're already an established customer, or if you've somehow indicated you expect calls like that. Otherwise, nope.
Good to know. And even if they can call, there are rules about timing.
Oh, yes. No calls before 8 in the morning or after 9 at night. And actually, it's before 9 a.m. on Sundays or, other non-standard working days. The FCA wants to protect people's downtime.
Thank goodness for that. No one wants a mortgage pitch at 9:30 p.m.
Definitely not. And critically, the conduct rules say if you at any point say you're not interested or ask them to stop, the caller must end the conversation immediately. No high-pressure sales tactics allowed if you've said no.
Okay, so that's the marketing phase covered. What happens next? You mentioned initial disclosure.
Yeah.
MCOB 4 and 4A?
That's right. This is the information they absolutely have to give you before they do any actual mortgage arranging or advising work. It's the point where they need to lay their cards on the table, so to speak.
Before any advice happens.
Yep.
And how do they provide this?
It has to be in what the FCA calls a durable medium.
Durable medium. Sounds technical.
It just means something permanent you can keep and refer back to. So, yes, paper counts. But also things like a PDF emailed to you or information on a secure website you can access later. The key thing is you can store it, refer back to it, and crucially, it can't be sneakily changed by the firm after they've sent it.
Right, so it fixes the information at that point in time. What information is it?
It boils down to 3 core things you need to know right at the start.
Right.
First, any limits on the range of products they offer. Second, how they get paid their remuneration. And third, information about alternative finance options, especially if you're looking to borrow more money secured against your home.
Secured borrowing. Just
Yeah.
using your house as collateral, basically.
Exactly. And if you're increasing that secured debt, the rules demand extra care and disclosure. And for these MCD-regulated mortgages we're talking about, a lot of this initial disclosure is contained within a standard document called the ESIS, the European Standardized Information Sheet.
ESIS. Okay, so that standardizes things.
That's the idea. It's meant to make it easier to compare information from different providers because it's presented in a consistent format. It covers those key pre-application details.
Let's dig into that product range point.
Yeah.
What do they need to tell you there?
They have to be crystal clear about the scope of their service. There are basically 3 possibilities they have to declare.
Okay.
First, they might offer an unlimited range, meaning they can genuinely recommend products from across the entire market. Or second, they might offer a limited range, usually meaning they work with a specific panel of lenders. If it's limited, they have to tell you which lenders are on that panel. Or third, they might be tied to a single lender, meaning they can only recommend products from that one bank or building society. Knowing which of these applies is crucial for understanding the potential bias or limitations of any advice you get.
Makes sense. You need to know if they're showing you the whole picture or just a slice.
Right.
And the second point was remuneration, how they get paid.
Yes, transparency about money. They must tell you up front if you will have to pay them a fee. And if so, how that fee is worked out. Is it, say, an hourly rate or a percentage of the loan amount? They also need to tell you when you'd have to pay that fee.
And what about commission from the lender?
That too. They have to disclose if they'll receive a commission, sometimes called a procuration fee or proc fee, from the lender for placing the business with them. So you understand all the financial incentives involved.
Right, so you see both sides, what you pay them and what the lender pays them. That clarity feels vital.
It really is. And it leads us nicely into probably the most critical protection point. The difference between getting proper qualified advice versus just doing an execution-only deal.
Execution only. Sounds efficient, maybe.
It can seem that way, but it carries far fewer protections. The default position under the rules is that if you're seeking a regulated mortgage, you must either be given qualified advice or you can choose to proceed execution only. But execution only means you're telling the firm, just process this specific mortgage I've chosen. I don't want your advice. And importantly, the firm then doesn't have the regulatory duty to check if that mortgage is actually suitable or appropriate for you.
So you lose that safety net.
Essentially, yes. That's why the FCA strongly expects firms to provide advice in most situations. Execution only is really meant for very specific, limited circumstances, usually where the customer is considered sophisticated enough to make their own decision without guidance.
Okay, so when is it allowed? If I just go onto a website and fill everything in, is that execution only?
It often can be, yes. If there's no interactive dialogue, like using a purely online application tool where you just input data and select a product, that can be execution only.
What if there is dialogue, like talking to someone?
Then execution only is generally not allowed, unless the customer falls into very specific categories. The main ones are being a high net worth individual, or H&W, or being classed as a professional customer.
High net worth. Is there a specific definition for that?
There is. You need to have an annual net income of at least £300,000 or net assets of at least £3 million, excluding your main home and pensions, etc. The regulator basically uses this threshold as a proxy. Assuming that level of wealth likely means you have the financial understanding to proceed without advice if you choose to.
300 grand income or 3 million in assets. Okay, that's a high bar. What about professional customer?
This one's a bit different. It typically means someone who works or has recently worked for at least a year in a professional position related to the mortgage market, like an underwriter or maybe an advisor themselves. The idea is they should understand the risks involved because of their job.
Okay. So if I worked in, say, mortgage admin for a year, just processing files, could I potentially be deemed professional enough to waive advice on my own £500,000 mortgage? Seems a bit of a stretch, maybe.
That's a really fair point, and it highlights the potential gray areas. The rule relies on the firm having a reasonable belief that the person's role gave them sufficient knowledge. It's not a perfect system, perhaps, but it's trying to balance allowing experienced people to bypass steps they might not need while still protecting the majority. It's definitely intended more for, genuine industry insiders.
Are there any other times execution only is okay?
There's one more main exception. If the customer has actually received advice, but then rejected that advice and specifically identified a different product they want instead. In that specific case, the firm can proceed on an execution-only basis for the customer's chosen product. But, and this is important, this rejection of advice route is not allowed for sale and rent-back agreements.
Right. Sale and rent back is treated very cautiously.
Extremely cautiously. And maybe more telling than who can use execution only is who cannot. The rules explicitly forbid it in certain situations, showing where the regulator mandates protection.
Like what situations?
Well, a firm cannot do an execution-only deal if you're using the mortgage to exercise a statutory right to buy your council home, for instance. Or, crucially, if the main purpose of the borrowing is debt consolidation.
Debt consolidation. Why is that singled out?
It reflects a core regulatory concern. The thinking is, if someone is consolidating debts, they might be under financial pressure, potentially making them more vulnerable. Mandating advice ensures someone checks that taking out a large secured loan to pay off smaller, often unsecured debts is actually in their best long-term interest and isn't just swapping one problem for potentially a bigger one.
That makes sense, protecting people in potentially difficult spots.
Exactly. And that same mandatory advice rule applies if you're entering a shared equity scheme. And perhaps most importantly, it applies to anyone identified as a vulnerable customer.
Vulnerable customers must get advice.
Absolutely. The FCA defines a vulnerable customer as someone who, due to their personal circumstances, is especially susceptible to detriment. If a firm identifies someone as potentially vulnerable, execution only is off the table. Advice is mandatory.
Okay, so the bar for avoiding advice is actually pretty high. Let's assume advice is given, which seems like the norm. What standard does that advice have to meet? You mentioned the standard of suitability.
Yes, this is fundamental. If a firm gives advice, they have a legal and regulatory duty to take reasonable steps to ensure their recommendation is suitable for your specific needs and circumstances.
And suitability means?
It means the recommended product has to pass 3 key tests. 1, it must be affordable for you. 2, it must be appropriate for the needs and circumstances you've told them about. And 3, it has to be the most suitable option from the particular range of products that specific firm offers.
A third one, most suitable from their range.
Right.
What if they have a cheaper product that also fits points 1 and 2?
Good question. If they recommend a more expensive mortgage, when a cheaper one from their range also seems suitable according to affordability and appropriateness, they must explain clearly and record the reason why they believe the more expensive option is actually better for you in the long run. Maybe it has more flexible features you need, for example, but they have to justify it.
And there's a record of this advice.
Yes, absolutely. The firm has to give you a record of their recommendation, usually within that ESIS document or something similar, provided on a durable medium. And they have to keep their own records of the advice given, including the justification, for at least 3 years. This gives you a window to challenge the advice later if things go wrong.
That feels like a solid safety net.
It is. And the ultimate safety net within the suitability rules is this. If, after assessing your situation, the firm finds that no product within the range they offer is actually affordable, appropriate, and suitable for you, then they are required to make no personal recommendation at all.
So they can't just push the least bad option.
Correct. They can't recommend something unsuitable just because it's the only thing they have available. Their duty is to suitability, full stop. If nothing fits, they recommend nothing.
Wow, okay. That really underlines the protective nature of the advice requirement. So just to quickly recap the key protections we've mapped out, advertising is tightly controlled. You've got the mandatory APRC, the risk warnings. Then there's that crucial initial disclosure about their product range and fees before you commit. And finally, very strict limits on when they can even think about skipping advice, with execution only basically banned for vulnerable customers or debt consolidation.
Exactly. The whole framework really positions advice as the default, the standard protection mechanism. Those exceptions, HNW, professional status, rejecting advice, they're quite narrow and usually need specific evidence or circumstances. Which, I suppose, leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. Given how much regulatory weight is put on protecting vulnerable customers or those consolidating debt by mandating advice, does it make sense that the average borrower, maybe someone just clicking through rates online or using an automated tool, can so easily opt for execution only? Is that potential bypass of expert advice ever really in the best interest of someone making perhaps the biggest financial decision of their life? Or is that regulatory bias towards advice the only truly reliable safeguard?
Something definitely worth thinking about next time you see that execution-only tick box online.